Hey there, and welcome back to another My Hero Academia Season 6 review. And today, we're going to be talking about the latest episode to drop, Threads of Hope, which picks up in the immediate aftermath of Best Jeanist making his return to try and immobilize all of the villains at once. And yeah, this episode's yet another banger. Every episode, you think that it can't possibly get any more epic than this, and then it does. And I'm loving every minute of this arc. And yeah, before we go any further, I would like to say that I have read the manga, and so I'm aware of any relevant future plot points and details, but for the purpose of these reviews, I prefer to approach them more from an anime-only perspective so that anime-only fans can watch along and join in too. Although, I haven't read it in a fair while, so I will have forgotten some details. And so yeah, with all that being said, let's jump into the review. So we start off the episode with a truly epic recap montage of the arc so far, basically just a highlight reel of the insane moments, and there have been many insane moments this season. So I was kind of glad they did this, just to remind us what's been going on. Because it's been bumper to bumper action and very easy to forget details here and there, so a refresh is very welcome. And then the intro plays, and we come back to the battle zone, where we get a quick look at what Best Jeanist was up to in the moments before he returned, watching Darby's broadcast on TV and realizing this entire thing has been Darby's plan all along. Wait until the heroes are vulnerable when they can't fight back, and then strike hard. And then he jumps out of his aircraft, which apparently nobody could hear coming, and unleashes his fiber attack to immobilize everybody. And yeah, to say that he arrived just in the nick of time would probably be the understatement of the century, considering the physical condition of the majority of the heroes here. Although, I gotta wonder, how the hell's Deku still conscious? The dude's arms seem to be shattered, and probably his legs too, and by now the adrenaline has surely worn off. But whilst he's uncomfortable and clearly in pain, he doesn't seem to be any worse than that. Kid must have an insane pain threshold, I'll tell you what. Darby then yells at him that he's supposed to be dead, and then Hawks had shown him a real corpse, and I can't even remember if they ever actually address that or they just brush it off, but it is a bit of a weird thing to include and yet not explain at all. I feel like a flashback would have been helpful there. But anyway, at this point, Shoto just decides to straight up attack Darby, and fair enough. It probably is for the best to try and take him down whilst he's restrained, but Darby just sets himself on fire and blocks the attack, sending them into a classic battle of will sort of scenario where they're both trying to overpower the other with their flames. A classic trope and one that never gets old in my opinion. Meanwhile, Spinner, who really has no chance of being a relevant combatant in this battle, starts to realize that now that Maki has completed his original goal, his super stamina seems to have faded away, and that Shigaraki needs to give him another order to allow him to break free and start fighting properly. Because at the moment, he's doing a half-hearted struggle at best. And so he starts trying to wake up Shigaraki by biting his head, which, well, it's not like he has any other options, so fair enough, I suppose. But of course, the heroes aren't just going to let that happen, and so Nejire flies over to try and neutralize them for good with her full power attack, only to get blasted away by Darby, who, god damn, Darby's strong. I mean, he's tied up in cables, and yet he's holding back Shoto, and yet whilst doing so, is also managing to shoot off a decently powerful attack that takes Nejire out of the game at the same time. Previously in the show, he's never really seemed like a massive threat. With Hawks, it felt like he was more the better matchup, rather than being massively strong, but I guess now his mask is off, he really doesn't care anymore and can truly go all out. It's actually really cool because he's become so compelling so quickly recently. I really love it. And all the while, he finds the time to still scream at his dad, mocking him for failing to save yet another person. He's so unhinged. Really great performance from the voice actor. Somehow, at the same time, Deku's still not finished and is trying to get back to his feet to help fight, as Darby's now burning through Best Jeanist cables, and Shoto's the only person in fighting shape to stop him. And so, eventually, he'll probably need some help. And then on top of that, it looks like Best Jeanist hasn't fully healed from his clash with All For One and Kamino, as blood's coming out of his mouth from the strain of keeping everybody contained. This is getting so intense. And I am really enjoying it, although the prospect of more Deku getting involved is kind of, I mean, I feel like he's had his battle now. Him getting involved even more, despite being so banged up, would kind of feel a bit silly to me. A bit cheap. I feel like it would really up the stakes and drama if it was the side characters that are dependent on to finish the battle. Makes it more stressful, as they're honestly in more danger than Deku would ever be, because some of them can actually die. And on top of that, I feel like Darby is the major villain of this later stage of the battle, because Shigaraki's pretty much finished off. Darby, he's not Deku's villain. Let Shoto take center stage there, I think. We move on to Shigaraki in a dream, remembering his truly awful upbringing and abuse at the hands of his father, and damn, I was just reminded how much I hate that guy. I tell you what, might sound horrible, but it was very cathartic when Shigaraki killed him. The rest of the family, not as good, especially the daughter. Although still, imagine allowing your son-in-law to beat your grandson, to abuse him. Screw those grandparents. Same with the mum, to be honest. I never got the vibe he beats the rest of the family, just Shigaraki, so yeah, kinda got what they deserved. Except for the dog and the sister, obviously. Anyway, Shigaraki wakes up after his little dream of his previous life and orders Makia to destroy, which causes the big man to power up and start going on a rampage, breaking free of some of those cables. And meanwhile, we see the battle of the minor heroes against the Nomu. We learn about half of the Nomu have been killed off, but more than half of the heroes have been killed off as well, so they're on track to lose this battle, which, yeah, honestly, that's pretty sad. This whole operation's pretty much been a complete and utter disaster from the hero POV. And to think, it all could have been avoided if that hero back in the hospital had pulled Shigaraki out of the goo moments before it got zapped with electricity, because he would have just stayed comatose forever then, and all the heroes would have had to do is destroy the high ends. And I mean, some of them might have died, but it wouldn't have been the outright massacre we're seeing now. Plus, the villa battle wouldn't have been derailed by Gigantomachia, so there'd be a lot less deaths over there. I mean, maybe he would have fought back a little bit once they made it to him, but it would be like when Genis was holding him back before he got his orders again. A half-hearted effort. They could have taken him then. We cut to Burnin, who's battling a flying Nomu, which makes its escape suddenly, likely being summoned alongside the rest of them to protect Shigaraki. A worm Nomu then attacks her from behind, and for a moment, I kind of thought this was going to be the last we see of her, that it would cut away and you'd assume she's dead. Because that'd be a major enough death for you to be sad. After all, we'd seen her throughout the Endeavor arc and the three boys got along with her. But minor enough that it would make sense to have her death be there solely for shock factor. But instead, she's saved at the last second by the arrival of Lemillion, who's back and quirked up once more. And yeah, get hyped, because Lemillion is a Chad. Honestly, I have missed him quite a bit. Him versus Overhaul was majorly hype, even though it was mostly a slideshow, but still, it was fun. We then return to the main battle, where Best Jeanist is still trying to hold firm, and Shoto and Darby are still going head to head. Understandably, Shoto's emotions are starting to kick in as he realizes his older brother's a serial killer who's out to destroy him, and doesn't care that Natsuo almost died because of his schemes, even though he was closest to Natsu of all the siblings. And yeah, looks like it's gone beyond a revenge fantasy for Darby now. The dude's completely and utterly batshit insane. And meanwhile, the Nomu start to arrive and are sneaking up on Best Jeanist, who wouldn't be able to do anything anyway, as he has to try and keep Makia and the rest contained. If he slips for a moment, he'll lose control. And since Shoto's fighting and Endeavor's in shock and Ida's carrying Nejire to safety, there's not many heroes available to stop them. And thus, Deku has a massive internal monologue about how he has to keep pushing to fight on, saying that he can still use Float and Black Whip to protect Jeanist, but thankfully we don't see that quite just yet, because Lemillion is back and he smacks away the Nomu. Power indeed. And in hindsight though, I feel like this return would have been way more epic if they hadn't shown him save Burnin. Just see the Nomu get knocked away, and then her reaction, but don't show the hero at all. Instead, we got a close-up of the cape, and we knew it was him. Because this way, it would have made you wonder who's going to save Jeanist in the build-up. You know he's going to be saved, but you don't know who it's going to be. But instead here, it was clearly Lemillion, so it was less impactful. We then have a wholesome flashback where it's revealed that Eri gave his powers back the day before, so he could help the Night Eye Agency in their attack on a smaller villain base. But that after that, he rushed over to help here once he heard how wrong everything had gone. In quite a humorous moment, however, after he ambushes the Nomu squad and saves Jeanist, he realizes he isn't actually strong enough to KO a Nomu or fight them all at once alone. Because yes, he can be a massive annoyance and fight for ages and not get injured, but he isn't somebody with huge raw potential, and so he has to call out for help, which in turn causes Bakugo to enter the fight once more. And this dude's been impaled, and he has ruptured organs, according to the dialogue. And yet he's still somehow able to move and fight. And honestly, since the show does go out of its way to tell you when somebody has an endurance quirk, I can't help but feel like this is sort of plot-armored BS. But whatever, it's cool and exciting, so I will allow it. Also, it turns out he's ascended to a new level after he saved Deku, so not only is he pushing through insane injuries, but he's stronger than he was before. Ida and Nejire then return to the battle to lend a hand, and suddenly things are looking a bit better for the heroes. I mean, it's almost certainly going to get worse for them again after this is all over, but for now, the momentum swung back around. Bakugo and Best Jeanist have a little bit of a moment, and Bakugo reveals his new name. Great Explosion Murder God Dynamite, which, yeah, I actually really enjoy that name. It's so extra and ridiculous that you just know the public would eat it up in the real world. And then there's the dynamite part of the name, you know, referencing his idol and combining it with a name that suits his quirk. Such a good one. Although, almost nobody agrees with this except for Lemillion. And he has the reaction that I feel like the public would probably have, thinking it's supposed to be a joke. And then the two villains, Compress and Spinner, make up the rest of what I'd expect the public would think. That's pretty lame and kinda cringe. Meanwhile, Darby looks like he's pretty much beaten Shoto off screen. Shoto's able to only hold himself up with his quirk and is stuck in a fiery bear hug from Darby, who's cackling about how the failed son is about to kill the prized pupil. And on top of that is quite eager to see what their father's going to look like after he realizes he's lost. And honestly, I get why they did it, but I wish they'd shown more of the fight and how Shoto, who almost never loses battles, was outgunned so quickly. Deku then makes the save using Froppy-style Black Whip, which, kind of wanted him to stay down. I mean, surely he's done enough and is now injecting himself into the showdown of brothers. I get that the final clash between them needs to be saved for later, but I really didn't like this part. And I feel like Darby agrees with that because he gets angry for him trying to inject himself into family matters and powers up even more. Anyway, Shoto has a puny fire shield back up and Deku looks finished off in terms of fighting, whilst Darby is still burning hot. And so Deku uses his secret quirk, the power of inspirational speeches, to repeat what he said at the sports festival to Endeavor, that Darby isn't Endeavor, and that he should be in charge of his own life and his own quirk, and not be beholden to the past, to move forward, just like everybody else is. But of course Darby doesn't give a shit about that, and why would he? Like he actually says earlier in the episode, he is crazy, and that's not going to change. But Deku's words do get through to Endeavor, who powers up and attacks Maquia just as he breaks free of his bindings, and I suppose this and the anesthetic combines to finally knock the big boy down. And this leaves the villains in a very bad situation. And whilst the heroes celebrate this, we get a look at all the damaged and fallen heroes from the other battles. Some are getting medical treatment, some are realistically dead, and some probably should be dead. How is Gran Torino still alive? The dude is a geriatric and got smashed into the concrete hard enough for the fist to go through him. Talk about plot armor. Meanwhile, Shoto's apparently back in the game and is able to keep fighting, whilst Darby's starting to overheat. And the other heroes are starting to rally against the Nomu, knowing that they likely can't win. But they can buy some time to ensure the victory, whilst Genis ties up the League even tighter, hoping to make them lose consciousness. And so, here it is looking like the heroes are going to take the win, but Compress has a last-second monologue to finish off the episode, lamenting that they haven't actually achieved anything they set out to do yet, and that he needs to do something to change the tide, which, in the preview, we see that he actually does. So battle's not over yet. Once again, another frickin' epic episode, and with the promise of even more going forward next week. God damn, this arc has been so intense. I feel like it's going to be such a tough act to follow. But regardless, with all that being said, that's the end of the video, and I would like to remind you that these have just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of the episode? You like it? Hate it? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.